Good morning and welcome to our Monday morning video about A Piece for Peace. This is video number 3 in a series of 4 that I'm doing in June, just to create a space for us to start some conversation and to get our heads around what it means to cultivate empathy for each other and really come together. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're actually going to talk about how to have conversation and what's all of the psychology and the spirituality and the sociology around all of that, all these big things. So instead of trying to explain it all to you, I want to show you this image, right? And I want to talk to you about conversation. Have you heard about the term called being siloed? Right, so it comes from the silos of farms and how everything can be sort of collected and kept apart and dispensed a little bit. Well, people can be siloed, ideas can be siloed, conversations can be siloed, right? And here you have it. And are you like me that you're trying to have conversation? I mean, I've been trying to have conversation around this every week for the last 3 weeks, every day of every week for the last 3 weeks. And are you, like me, finding at this stage of the game that your conversations are getting stuck? Sometimes they get stuck because we get frustrated. Sometimes they get stuck because there's a lot of grief and the stories that you're hearing or you're sharing are hard. And sometimes they get stuck because you're just overwhelmed and you don't quite understand how to bring these silos together, because you don't want to do this, right? You don't want to do that. But you don't want to stay here either. Right? You want to be able to come together in a way that step by step you can move forward. That's what you want. That's what everybody wants. And that's hard. It's hard to keep it together. And if it seems big and if it seems overwhelming, then know that it's overwhelming because it's big. It's massive. Because if it wasn't, then we would have had change by now. We've been talking about this as human beings for thousands of years. And every chapter we move things forward a little bit. But the bigness of it all still remains. So, as we move forward, I want to talk to you about teaching peace. And just take a look at this slide for a bit. This is taken from a graphic that's out there and all the images on the internet about teaching peace. And I think that what's beautiful about it, right, is it shows us that teaching peace is a process. It's not about somebody who writes a book from one part of the world and puts it on a shelf, and then maybe you go buy it and then you come home and you read it. That's not where it ends. That's where it begins. I mean, writing the book and giving us the knowledge and telling the stories is important, but that's not where it ends. That's where it begins. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things I've been taught about how to move things forward, and see how much of it resonates with you and how much you can share with others. So before we move forward into that, I want to call your attention to 2 links that are in the comments below. The first is a worship service, a church service that I'm part of the East End Collective of East Ottawa, or the eastern part of Ottawa, and then onto the Quebec side in Gatineau, where there is a really excellent sermon by the Reverend Carolyn Penhale of Orleans United Church. And she will talk to you in that sermon about the condition of spirit, the state of mind that we are all called to enter these conversations with. So go check that out. And then the second is a service that was broadcast last night at 7 o'clock by the Black Clergy Network of the United Church of Canada. And it tells the story. It tells it in song. It tells it in prayer. It tells us in sermons. It tells us by all the people who participated and all the people who chose to stay in the background and hold their brothers and sisters up in prayer. There are ministers who willingly step back from this to make room for others to speak. And the contrast of these two really shows you how it is possible to come together and move forward. Now, it's big, isn't it? If it starts at the conversation, doesn't finish there, there's a real danger to overthink everything because it's so big. And I have that tendency. And yet it is impossible to move forward without academics or with knowledge. And so we're going to take a few minutes just to talk about that, and then I want to share with you rather a story about some advice I was given about how to move things forward. The first piece that I want to give you is this piece about leadership. Edwin Cole is an author from the United States who writes about leadership. He wrote a book called The Potential Principle, and he talks about 4 levels of leadership. He talks about the level of assumption, he talks about the level of knowledge, he talks about the level of skill, and he talks about the level of practice. And really quickly, we see assumption all over the place, don't we now? I mean, we're sequestered at home, and so we're turning to social media in greater and greater numbers. And so everybody gets a chance to have their say, and everybody gets a chance to offer their opinion, and not a lot of stuff that you see goes beyond the level of assumption, because even if it's founded in facts, it's founded in just a very small portion of a much larger conversation. So it's hard to get into a knowledge-based understanding of what's happening. But without knowledge, there can be no skill, and without skill, there can be no ability to put things into practice. Kind of like having a medical practice, or a ministry practice, or an education practice, or whatever it is, right? A spiritual practice. So the next piece that I wanted to add is from my leadership coach, and her name is Ruth Andermatt, and she talks about four related but somewhat more personal levels of awakening. She talks about the awakening of hope. She talks about the recognition of potential. She talks about the delving into really examining what's possible, and she talks about the commitment to make things actual. So here's how this works. There are, in the United Church, right across the country, almost 3,900 ministers who work in almost 2,900 churches and missions right across the country. That's just the United Church. And yesterday, as I'm watching the videos, both in the morning and at night, I'm filled with hope. And when I think about 3,900 ministers just in the United Church, and I think about 2,900 preaching points and missions, I see tons of potential. And then I think about how big it is, and I wonder what's possible, and will we even be able to move past this conversation? And it's easy to get bogged down. And so, as I was thinking about all these things last week, and at Carleton Memorial and St. Andrew's United Church, we are moving into August, planning a 12-week speakers series about moving conversation forward and trying to move from potential to possible to actual. And I'm really aware that, that's just a drop in the bucket. And so I call up one of my clergy colleagues who's a member of the Black Clergy Network in Toronto, and I ask her for some And I say to her, I said, I'm having trouble understanding what to do and how I'm going to approach some of these people that I'd like to invite. She asked me, she says, well, I don't understand. Why are you having trouble? Like, why? And I said, I don't want to seem arrogant or presumptive. I don't want to seem delusional, like somehow I'm the next greatest person who's going to run around and solve anything, because I just know it's only 12 weeks of stuff, right? I mean, it's so big. And she says to me, I know, but, we have to start somewhere. So I said, well, how do I approach these people without sounding like I don't care, or not sounding like I'm out to lunch, or not sounding like I'm being patronizing, or not sounding like I'm trying to be politically correct? How do I do that? Her advice to me was pretty simple. And she's just said to me, she says, just ask. Just ask. Don't promise the world, obviously, but just ask. Don't ask us, during Black History Month, but just ask. And so, I will. I will ask not just for people to come speak. I will ask what it is about the reality of my black clergy people and why they see the world differently, how they see the world differently, why their culture is as beautiful and as vibrant and as committed and as intelligent and as progressive as it can be. What is their reality and what do they have to inform me that will change the way I put my ministry into practice? So thank you to my friend. And to all of us, be blessed, be a blessing. Just ask. Amen.